it would mean she looked like she was on the verge of death. So again, it was really traumatizing. I met young women who were victims of unthinkable, unspeakable atrocities and who had lost all hope. And as one young woman said to me, she had lost her ambition. Colleagues, the senseless conflict in Sudan has gone on for almost 5 months, more than 5 months. And in that time, the Rapid Support Forces and allied militias have carried out atrocity after atrocity. Homes have been burned and looted. Civilians have been shot dead in the streets. Women and girls have faced rape and other forms of conflict-related sexual violence. The violence is the consequence of years of impunity, as you heard, inaction. The international community has failed to hold those responsible for previous crimes to account. So these guys think they can do it again. We failed to secure justice for the people of Darfur, and that needs to change immediately. The United States supports the International Criminal Court prosecutor's announcement that alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity committed in Darfur during the current fighting may be subject to ICC investigation, and that his office has commenced focused investigations on recent events. The reported atrocities in Darfur are an ominous reminder of the horrific events that led the United States to determine in 2004 that genocide had been committed in Darfur. And we must not let the promise of never again ring hollow. Today, I want to urge the entire international community to demand an end to the fighting in Sudan, support documentation and accountability efforts, and surge humanitarian assistance to the region. As we approach the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we must live up to the ideals laid out in this foundational document. And we must demand the parties comply with their obligations under international human rights law and international humanitarian law, including the protection of civilians. While not a substitute for accountability, the United States will continue to take actions to target any party to the conflict responsible for ongoing atrocities. While in Chad, I announced sanctions on Abdel Rahim Hamdan Dagalo, a senior commander in the RSF, for his connections to abuses against civilians, including conflict-related sexual violence and killings based on ethnicity. And I announced U.S. visa restrictions on RSF General and West Darfur Commander Abdul Rahman Juma for his involvement in gross violations of human rights. Let me be clear, both sides have instigated unrelenting violence that has caused death, destruction, and carnage across Sudan, in Darfur, in Khartoum, and in many other areas. And we will continue to do everything in our power to prevent and respond to mass atrocities. You can have my word on that. Colleagues, the eyes of the world are on us, and the eyes of history are on us. And we must come together, and we must commit to justice, to accountability, and to peace for the people of Sudan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. I'd now like to invite to the podium His Excellency Dawda Jallow, the Attorney General of the Gambia.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. The Gambia is grateful for the opportunity to sponsor this very important dialogue with the permanent mission of the United Kingdom, Canada, and Norway, as well as the United States of America. we welcome the opportunity to participate and share a few remarks on our collective concern in Sudan. The Gambia joins others to echo concern about the dire humanitarian and human rights situation in Sudan, which calls urgent action for accountability in Sudan. As we gather here today, we are reminded of the profound duty we bear towards the vulnerable population of Sudan, who are suffering unimaginable hardships. The various reports we have seen on Sudan paint a grim picture of alleged human rights abuses and potential atrocity crimes. We find ourselves at a critical juncture, recognizing that the lack of accountability for past atrocities in Darfur has contributed to the ongoing violence. We must therefore break this cycle and ensure that justice prevails. This is a moment that calls for unity and collective resolve. Our commitment to justice and human rights must be unwavering. We must demonstrate that international law is not just an abstract concept, but a tangible force that can protect the rights of all members of our international community. Today's high-level side event serves as a platform to bring together the international community, including civil society, to explore how our collective action can effectively address the human rights and accountability crisis in Sudan. We must pledge our unwavering support to those who are tirelessly working on the ground to restore justice and hold the principles that underpin the international community. In conclusion, Gambia joins the international community to consider the weight of our collective responsibility in this critical moment. Let us work together, resolutely and with determination, to ensure that human rights and the rule of law, accountability are at the forefront of our response to the Sudanese tragedy. We owe it to humanity to condemn and punish crimes against humanity with a view to avoiding seeds of discord from being sowed. The international community must learn lessons from the Darfur situation and collectively join efforts to end impunity. We must do more to deter and end crimes against humanity from occurring. In this context, the Gambia calls on the international community to support the International Law Commission's recommendation to elaborate draft articles on crimes against humanity to a future standalone convention. Our commitment, cooperation, and resources are essential to making a meaningful difference in the lives of those who need it the most. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much. You'll now hear from Her Excellency Dame Barbara Woodward, the Ambassador of the United Kingdom.
Good morning, and thank you, Amal, for that kind introduction. We are very proud indeed to be co-hosts today. But I want to express my deep gratitude too to the International Criminal Court and the Chief Prosecutor, Karim Khan, and to other members of the panel today for their commitment to justice in Sudan and for making this event today possible. As we... Oops. Sorry about that. As we all know, and as we've already started to hear today, the reports of the atrocities being committed in Darfur are horrific, and Linda's description was very powerful and very moving. We hear about ethnically targeted killings, the sexual violence, the destruction of homes and villages being inflicted on a population already scarred by the atrocities of the early 2000s. And while the atrocities in Darfur are clearly being perpetrated by the Rapid Support Forces and allied militias, we should be clear that both sides, including the Sudanese armed forces, bear responsibility for plunging Sudan back into war. So we repeat our call to the Sudanese armed forces and the Rapid Support Forces to end this bloodshed and negotiate a permanent ceasefire in good faith, because it is Sudanese civilians who are bearing the brunt of this brutal conflict. And as we've heard too, as Amal said, this situation is a vivid reminder that accountability for atrocities remains one of the prerequisites of peace and stability. Sudan is suffering today in part because of the absence of justice for past human rights violations and abuses. And this sense of impunity has helped sow the seeds for this latest cycle of violence and suffering and has stoked community grievances along with that. For our part, the UK will continue to shine a light on the ongoing atrocities in Darfur, and with our international partners, we'll strive to bring all parties involved in these heinous crimes to justice. We very much welcome the ICC prosecutor's decision to open investigations into offences committed in the current conflict, and will continue to offer extensive support to the Office of the Prosecutor in his Sudan investigations. But Amal, you asked us to have a concrete and productive discussion. So let me put out 5 examples of things that the UK is doing in the hope that this will inspire and underpin our forthcoming conversation. First of all, monitoring. The UK has increased our capacity to monitor the atrocities, including sharing evidence with the UN Office of the High Commission for Human Rights and the International Criminal Court to ensure that culprits can be held accountable. Second, we will continue to fund and provide support to the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, who are now deploying staff to neighbouring countries' borders to interview survivors of violence with a view to collecting witness testimonies. Third, as with the US, we have imposed sanctions on 6 entities linked to the SAF and the RSF. Fourth, during the current Human Rights Council in Geneva and in the forthcoming Third Committee here in New York, we will consider how best to follow up the Human Rights Council resolution in May on Sudan. Fifth, we need to think too, I think, about how AI can help us, and Alice and I were having a discussion about this earlier as well. So just 5 ideas, and I hope those help spark discussion. But in closing, let me underline the United Kingdom's support to the court to deliver justice for the people of Darfur. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barbara. We will hear from a few more states later in the programme, but for now I'm delighted to invite onto the stage the panel members, please. We're missing one of them, but she is on her way and will join us shortly. So for the other 3, please join on stage. Thank you. Karim, if I may start with you, and the idea is we'll hear from the panel first and then we'll open it up. What do we need to do to make sure that relevant evidence gets to the ICC and you're able to be prosecuting cases in a reasonable amount of time? I know everyone here, I think, has heard that Karim has already announced that the Office of the Prosecutor is looking into current crimes as well as dealing with existing warrants. What more do you need from people who are here and around the world?
Well, firstly, thank you for moderating, Amal, and for all your support over many years. What we need in very short shrift is everybody, all of us, to live up to our responsibilities. We're here because many have failed. The Security Council failed over 20 years because in 2005 it made a resolution that Sudan represented and the situation in Darfur represented a threat to international peace and security. So there's been some progress, but the Darfuris are suffering, the Sudanese are groaning under misery, and I think Ambassador Barbara Woodward put it very clearly, the 5 out of the 5 areas, the first one, states with capacity to monitor more closely, because that gives a wider stream of information that constitutes evidence that can be shared. So it's the provision of information in relation to ongoing activities and then a willingness to share it. I think it's very important, and I'm really grateful for the Attorney General and Minister of Justice of the Gambia to be here, because this is in the continent of Africa. I'm a big believer in the call by the African Union for African solutions to African problems. Well, this is the opportunity. There's a problem staring humanity in the face. Let's work together in these partnerships. And I think whether it's IGAD or any other structure, it's about not talk. Concrete action is needed to to bend the trajectory away from criminality and suffering and tears towards humanity. Because as the permanent representative of the United States mentioned, Thomas Grenfell, it is a harrowing story. The vision of history past, of going to Chad and seeing the starving, the emaciated children, and they have a right to emancipation from suffering. It is a nightmare that is playing out in broad daylight, in fact, in the scorching sun. So I think what we also need is build partnerships, and I think we're very lucky in having, in the Secretary General, having a special advisor for the prevention of genocide of the caliber of Alice Nderitu. In fact, her predecessor, our special advisor at the ICC, Adama Dieng, just published an article today in The Guardian about Sudan, completely coincidentally. But we're planning to go to Sudan, to Chad this year, because we need to work together, the United Nations and the ICC, to move things forward. I think all the items mentioned, whether it's sanctions, are very important. But there are states, there are two sides at least to this conflict. There's the RSF and the SAF. The history is well known. There are some states that are supporting them. I don't need to mention which states. And I think we need them to support humanity instead. And it is a choice. It is a choice at this moment. It's not either or. But the quest to support humanity is a very important one. And I think what we need is some common sense as well. The parties should realize that we have a mandate. But if anybody in the party, whether it's the head of the RSF or the head of the SAF, or whether it's anybody down the chain of command, even at this late stage, whatever has happened, it's not too late to start cooperating with my office. It's not too late to start giving information. It's too late to those that are dead. It's too late to those that have suffered. But in terms of the quest or the aspiration to deliver on justice, I invite them, and I've raised it actually with the government, with President Burhan and with General Hemeti, engage. But they're not. There's this eerie, contemptible silence, and all we hear are the cries of children and this outrage. I mean, we're lawyers. I'm a lawyer. I'm a prosecutor. We have to be detached and objective in the application of our mandate. But it doesn't mean we're devoid of passion and emotion and our moral compass. And if we're not outraged by what we're seeing here, where's our humanity? And I think that goes back to the very first point. What we need is each of us to do our best to live up to our responsibilities, realizing words of no comfort to people in Chad or the people that are suffering under missile attacks or burnings or destructions of property, and a country is being rendered ever more fragile. And my last point, if I may, because I think it is important, civil society has a very important role to play. We need to engage more with civil society. Hopefully when our guest Niemat comes, our fellow panelist comes, I think we see this is bigger than politics, and it's bigger than actually anything. It really is about people that are innocent, that have a right to live in peace. And if we can share, whether it's satellite evidence, intercepts, or other kind of information, probably we can move the dial a bit further towards justice and accountability.
Thank you. Well, I think that's a clear call to individual states to share what they have. I think there's also definitely room for better coordination, whether it's on sanctions or indeed evidence sharing. So some kind of task force similar to what was created for Ukraine. I think there are survivors around the world who see robust and concerted action on Ukraine, and this is they are no less deserving elsewhere. So I hope that perhaps we're going to hear from states and those who are willing to commit to being a part of an effort like that. Please say so. Alice, if I may turn to you. You are the Special Advisor of the United Nations Secretary General on the Prevention of Genocide. Is what's happening in Sudan genocide? Are we headed in that direction? If not, and what more needs to be done, including by people in this room, to prevent it?
Thank you very much, Amal, and thank you to all of you who spared the time to come here today. I believe this is one of the most important meetings happening during this high-level week, and especially because civil society has access to this meeting and they are here. And in answer to your question, I am mandated to advise the Secretary General to provide early warning in the event of whether a genocide is happening or not. And I issued a statement last year in September. I think that was right after the ICC prosecutor had gone to Sudan, and the special advisor on R2P and myself, we issued a statement welcoming the fact that the ICC prosecutor had gone to Sudan and that the cases in Darfur were moving. We all know the history of Darfur. We know the 20 years of injustice, of people indicted, including the former president, and what happened since the indictment and the protection he got from quite a number of states. And so I do not have quasi-judicial powers or judicial powers to determine whether or not a genocide is happening. However, I am mandated to analyze situations on the basis of what we call our framework of analysis, developed by my office, and determine whether there are risk factors that point to the existence of genocide or to a situation that's leading up to genocide. After the statement of September, I issued another statement in November, and I was talking about the Blue Nile, and I was saying that there does exist risk factors for genocide, just as I did in the statement in September. And then after that, then I got to the ground and I went, including to the African Union, had meetings with the African Union Commission Chair and with quite a number of people, just discussing what is it that we need to do to prevent this before it rolls out. Because already the killings were there. The killings did not start with this war that is happening now between the two generals. The killings have been happening for quite some time, including in Darfur itself. And then after that, in June, I issued another statement. And then saying exactly the same things, the risk factors for genocide do exist in the situation in Darfur and within Sudan itself. And then I went and addressed the Human Rights Council, and there I made the strongest statement that I had made about Sudan. And I said, we must do something about Sudan right now. The conflict that's going on in Sudan right now, the identity conflict, we must put wind in the sails of the ICC. We must ensure that we get things moving in terms of preventing what's coming. So then the violence continued, and then I issued another statement again in September. And of course, I don't stop issuing statements, and I'll keep issuing statements because I need to keep telling the world what's happening on the ground. So in terms, to answer your question, is a genocide happening in Darfur or not? I have said unequivocally in every single statement I've issued and in all the places that I've spoken that all risk factors that could point to the event of a genocide happening in Darfur, especially, and in the larger Sudan, are happening now.
Thank you. A very chilling conclusion. Radhouane, if I may turn to you, you are the designated expert of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights on Sudan. As Karim said, there was an op-ed published just this morning in The Guardian by a former expert who said, we are spectacularly failing the people of Sudan. What do you see as being the key challenges when it comes to gathering evidence, including evidence that can end up leading to prosecutions in The Hague?
Thank you, Madam Moderator, Excellencies. Since this conflict has erupted in Sudan, not a single day has passed without more atrocities, more violations of human rights, more destruction, and more uprootedness. We have collected them in the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights, has collected a large number of testimonies and accounts from victims, family members, and witnesses. And these testimonies are very much consistent with my own collection and reports on the scale of brutality and devastation that is taking place in Sudan. Indeed, Darfur has witnessed very serious violations, but Darfur, and this echoes indeed the devastation of 20 years ago, but Darfur is not the only region, conflict-affected region in Sudan that has witnessed atrocities. Many other regions are doing the same. And while I commend very much the decision of the Honorable Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court on 13 July to the Security Council to open investigation on what is happening recently in Darfur, there is a need, and this is up to the international community indeed to decide, to open similar investigations for other conflict-affected regions in Sudan. What is repulsing to hear of the ongoing situation in Sudan in general is this epidemic of conflict-related sexual violence. It is really something that humanity has rarely seen. We have already credible reports of on 49 cases involving 101 persons, and this is, in my view, just the tip of the iceberg, because what is hiding, what people do not disclose, is much, much higher. And the majority of the perpetrators of these atrocities are men in RSF uniform or armed men with these affiliated with the RSF. In my view, Madam Moderator, what is worrying in Sudan nowadays is this trend of new political parties that have their armed groups behind, joining one side or the other. And they are targeting specific tribes, specific ethnicities. And this could trigger a civil war at some stage and entrench this tribal or ethnical hostilities in such a diversified, ethnically diversified country. After a few months dealing with this situation, I have come to three conclusions. One, the international community needs to speak with one voice and have a unique, coherent, unified position vis-à-vis this conflict. A variety of roadmaps and initiatives would not help. My second conclusion is that the specificities of this conflict in Sudan, given these specificities, I believe that no party will go out winning or victorious of this war. My third conclusion, there is an urgent need in Sudan to stop impunity. I was already before the conflict. I was in Sudan where I met with a large number of NGOs, human rights defenders. Their primary concern was the lack of accountability. And their primary request was to stop the impunity that is prevailing in Sudan for many, many decades.
Thank you. I think this is actually the perfect moment to introduce our last panelist, Niemat. Hello, welcome. I believe Niemat has just emerged heroically from a train-related disaster, and we're so happy that you were able to join us. Niemat, all of you who've been following Sudan will know of her fantastic work. She's the founder of the Darfur Women Action Group. Niemat, we'd love to hear from you, what's happening on the ground? What are you hearing from people on the ground? And what more do you think can be done to harness the ability of local actors to gather evidence that can one day be admissible in trials, including in The Hague? And sorry, just let me know if you need a moment before answering that.
Well, thank you so much for organizing this important event, and I would like to thank our audience. Well, it is a very difficult job to describe or to relay the message that we hear from people on the ground. It is beyond describable. As you all know that the situation in Khartoum is horrifying enough, where rapid support forces occupying civilians' homes, abducting women, killing people if they refuse to leave their homes. At the same time, the government army is bombing civilians' homes, destroying services, electric, water, bridges. Khartoum housed about 9-point-something million people. Of those, about 1 million were able to flee because they can afford to flee. Most of those who left are trapped and dying. While this is horrible, the situation in Darfur is very different. You see the government and army and the rapid support forces fighting in Khartoum. In Darfur, the fight is against civilians. And it is very systematic in its nature and scope. The rapid support forces come into a city. First thing they do, they isolate people from all survival means, cutting them from water, food, looting markets and burning it, looting warehouses of organizations like World Food Program, looting hospital, pharmacies, and then they burn it, loot civilians' properties, loot vehicles, and then killing. So people are left with two options, either to die by bullet or by lack of food, medicine, or trauma and horror that they put through. And this is happening not just randomly, it is very systematic and well calculated, ethnically driven, like the case of Al Junaina. They go house after house searching for the Masalid people. If you are not Masalid, if you don't tell them where the Masalid neighbors are, you will be killed. And we all have witnessed, and I have never wished to live to see this, whereby people killed, slaughtered, recorded, and broadcasted live from Al Junaina for people who live here in the United States to see and across the world. I thought that should have shocked the world conscience and prompted us all to act to do something to end it immediately. Unfortunately, it is continuing, and I think ICC has provided a unique and exceptional opportunity. The crisis in Sudan today and in Darfur is the cost of immunity that we allowed for the genocide that was started 20 years ago. And for do whatever they want and they can go free. I know there was hope back then when the case of Ali Kosheb was brought to trial, and we all hope that all Sudanese will work with us during the interim period to pursue justice. Unfortunately, justice was neglected, and here we are. Today, I have not spoken to my family members for 5 months. Other cities that were targeted, Dalingi, Morne, Wadi Saleh, Kutum, Tawila and Kutum were completely emptied of its population. These are cities with a majority of the indigenous African tribes that were long ago targeted for killing. So you can imagine cutting communication in Darfur today. Communication is important as much as food and water. And when people can't communicate, neighbors can call their neighbors to ask for help. Those who are wounded, they cannot seek emergency assistance because they cannot call for that help. Niala is the last example, one of the most vibrant city. 80% of the population of that city were forced to flee. Many have been killed, and the government airstrike is actively killing people rather than fighting among themselves. So,
thank you very much, Niemat. Thank you. I think it's so important for everyone to hear this, particularly as tomorrow General Burhan will be behind a podium at the United Nations telling presumably a rather different story. Niemat, just before we move on, is there anything, I mean, we're here with powerful states, we're here with UN representatives, we're here with prosecutors. What does civil society on the ground need? What can people here in this room do to help them get evidence out and into the hands of prosecutors like Karim Khan?
well, thank you, Amal. I think that's a very important question. With all this horror and the sad picture that I shared with you, would encourage us and empower us all to get up every day and do what we can, is the resilience of the people of Sudan and the resilience of the people of Darfur. People stayed in camps through 20 years. Children were born in the camps. They have known nothing other than war and destruction. But what they did, 3 things. They immediately started by going out, women, youth, civil society leaders, helping when the international agencies and international diplomats walked out because of insecurity. The people of Sudan stepped up to fill that vacuum, even though it is not possible to fill, but they are doing their best. Documentation is one of the biggest. All the pictures, the information that you see, women are creating groups, documenting every single incident. I myself, I was amazed, even though I come from Sudan and I have seen what we have done before on the ground. But you can't imagine people walking out of their homes every day to know what happened to their neighbors, putting names together, taking people to hospitals, and providing humanitarian assistance. And they are still hopeful because when they document this information and share it, they believe that one day justice will serve So let us all not to let them lose that hope and make that hope come into reality by supporting them, providing them with direct support, funding, training, protection of civilians. Today, if nothing being done, people are not going to stand the horror, the starvation, the ongoing killing. I think our leaders who are gathering here, they need to step up a robust intervention to provide civilians protection and open an unhindered humanitarian access to protect, to allow people who survive to continue to live, but also protect the humanitarian agencies. In that horror, nobody should go in to help if it is not safe for them. And then these two steps will pave the way for justice to take its course. I think accountability is the most important aspect in this crisis, because the people of Sudan have to learn something new. And if we can pursue justice so that people, if they disagree, they don't need to pick guns. They can go to court. And I was so empowered by going to The Hague, observing the trial of Ali Kosheb. Even though it came really late for people sitting in the camp for 20 years, but for me, it was of a significant importance because it was the first time for the Darfuri victims were allowed to tell their story in the court of justice. It is about the dignity. So let us pursue justice. These 3 steps then will pave the way for peace and transformation of Sudan. I think Sudan needs an atrocity prevention approach that prioritizes accountability for those who are responsible. Otherwise, the situation in Darfur and the situation in Sudan will never be resolved. Let us all commit that we support. We appeal to ordinary citizens and those of you who are policymakers to be our voice and to be the voice for the people of Darfur who have the voice, but their voice have been silenced and oppressed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Niemat, for those powerful words. I'd like to open it up now to discussion from the floor. I know we have a number of civil society groups. I'm going to try and bring in as many people as possible, but if we do point to you, can you please tell us your name and your affiliation so that we know who is speaking? And please, no long speeches, but I encourage you to make a comment and address a question to the panel if you have one. Yes, over there. There should be someone with a microphone. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator, and the panel, and to the organizers. My name is Chidi Anselm Odenkalo. I work with Atrocities Watch Africa. My questions, very quickly, to broad issues. To the states that are here, the UN is just 2 blocks away. Why is this conversation taking place here and not at the United Nations? Why is it that Sudan has not got on the agenda of the Security Council? And we're having this conversation in a philanthropy. What happened to states as the responsible entities for this kind of conversation? That's my first question. And to the prosecutor, the prosecutor speaks about African solutions to African problems. You mean Sudan is an African problem? What's an African problem when we are talking about atrocities that of the sort that we have listened to here this morning? And is it not exactly that problem of creating an African ghetto that the world does not care about Africa? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to take a few more questions and we'll collect them. Yes.
Thanks so much. Tarana Hassan from Human Rights Watch. Firstly, I just did want to have one reflection before I pose my question, and that's that, we talk a lot about accountability in the accountability space, which is really around, counting the dead. It's when we count the villages that have already been burnt. And I think part of the conversation that we're not having, particularly this week, is what is the United Nations central role in prevention? And how can we have sort of action that's moving forward that is about saving lives? But my question in particular, so accountability and justice, as we know, is central and key to resolving conflicts. But sadly, we have seen that it can be sidelined. And we've seen this in Sudan, and we are currently living through the very dark consequences of accountability being sidelined for peace, in peace negotiations. And what we're seeing now is or the concern rather from Human Rights Watch's perspective is, as the conversation is progressing now, there is a real risk that once again, accountability is pushed to the side as political solutions are being sought. So I guess for the panel, what are the safeguards that we can see put in at this stage to ensure that as any sort of political process moves forward, that justice and accountability are going to be central? Thanks.
Thank you. I'll take one more question and then we'll turn it over to the panel. Yes, the lady in the front.
Used to being on the street. Sharon Silber, Jews Against Genocide and Act for Sudan. I have a brief statement from a leading member of the Masalit community in El Janina. So I wanted to just read his words. I'm not going to say his name because I don't want any consequences for him. He is strongly connected to West Darfur, residing now in the United States. It's 5 months since the brutal war erupted in the city of El Janina. 8,000 people have lost their lives, thousands more injured, and 500,000 have been displaced to Chad. Heinous crimes were committed and clearly documented by the criminals themselves, such as the killing of the governor of the state. But until now, we have not seen any tangible action taken by the international community to stop these barbaric acts.
Sorry, can I ask you to just move on to the question? I'm so sorry, we only have a limited number of minutes for this segment.
Okay, so what he is saying is, what can he tell the people of his community that he is still getting calls from on a daily basis from the city that they are unsafe, that these actions are taken forward? And I would just add as my own comment on this, we're also getting horrific reports from the camps in Chad about the conditions there and the continuing violation of women who do not have adequate access to sanitation. What can be done to ensure the human rights of those women who are unsafe because of the conditions there?
Thank you. Okay, to the panel. So we had a question about the role of states and should the UN be convening this discussion, African solutions to African problems, the UN's role in prevention as opposed to just punishment, and will accountability be pushed to the side? And then the last question, obviously many of the reports have focused on the targeting of the Masalit community. Is there any message back to them? But just a brief response from each of you, if possible. Karim, Alice, did you want to go first? We can just go in this order.
I'll speak to the question of what is the UN's central role in prevention that was asked by Human Rights Watch. And primarily that would be, so what happens, for example, when I issue statements? And what happens is that agencies, especially humanitarian agencies, get on the ground, and depending on whether they can get access, then they are able to then begin moving. OCHA, for example, we have the UNHCR, the High Commissioner for Refugees, and then for the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, by the time I issue a statement, they usually have already started pointing out the human rights violations. I usually come in at the point where they've pointed it out, and then I to build on what they've been talking about. and specify specifically that what I'm speaking about is in relation to genocide and the related atrocity crimes such as war crimes and crimes against humanity. So then the UN, also the Security Council, of course, plays a huge role. We do know that there is supposed to be strong existence of build-up based on the principle of responsibility to protect, in which it is expected that the state itself should take care of its citizens, and if it cannot do that, needs help, gets help from the international community. It's a very politicized concept. However, we do know that at this particular time that the Security Council can still do a lot. I spoke about the Darfur, but I also spoke about the Blue Nile. There's violence also in Kordofan, lots of people killed in Kordofan. We've had killings in Khartoum, lots of killings in Khartoum. And one of the things that the Security Council can do right now is to, in exercise of its primary responsibility, is to expand the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court to cover not only crimes listed in the Rome Statute covering the territory of Darfur, but also to cover the entire territory of Sudan. That's absolutely important. And that needs then the question that Professor Chidi asked in terms of states, because we do need states to then stand up. We do need to have those kind of decisions made by the Security Council on the basis of the knowledge of the people who are dying right now in Sudan. The people who are suffering in Sudan right now must occupy center space. The UN Charter has to be placed on the table for us to have that discussion of remembering why the UN exists in the first place, so that then we make very serious decisions for Sudan. I spoken earlier about the 20-year length of time. I know that the wheels of justice, of course, are very slow also from other post-genocidal societies. I know how slow they are. But the UN is documenting right now huge amounts of documentation coming in that we must keep doing, and supporting as much as possible people on the ground. But we also need to do specific commissions of inquiry into all those places that I've mentioned. Not one commission of inquiry for Sudan, specifics, because the issues are so contextual, so granular, so different. Thank you.
Thank you. I do think one of the lessons that we've learned from previous conflicts is separate commissions of inquiry with different mandates, not necessarily geared towards identifying perpetrators, doesn't necessarily help the prosecution process as much as something like a IIM model, but that's probably beyond the scope of today. I'm going to ask you each to be really brief because we're hearing from some more states, and then if we have more time, we can come back. But Karim, can I give you the floor next?
Well, if I may try to deal with the three questions, kind of in a bit of a long answer, but I'll try to be as brief as possible. The reference to African solutions to African problems is simply a willingness for everybody to fulfill their responsibilities. The Security Council, myself, the United Nations, and the region. What the Special Advisor just said now is very important, that if she makes the recommendation and if the Council wishes to expand the mandate of the referral beyond Darfur, Africa, particularly the Africa Group, has a very important role to play if they wish to support it or not, because the Council is dysfunctional. There's division. There's a doctrine of non-interference, but if the region, if the neighbours, if those involved think it's a good idea, if the experts of the High Commission of Human Rights see a need, then these are things that can be decided on the merits by the Council. These are political issues. In terms of the second question, Human Rights Watchers, regarding, you know, the Council is actually engaged. I mean, the Council, I brief the Council myself twice a year. There's many other discussions underway. There's sanctions that have been applied by permanent members of the Council and other members of the Council. And even at this event, we have two foreign ministers. We have the Foreign Minister of Canada, we have the Foreign Minister of Norway, we have the permanent representative of the United States, as well as the United Kingdom, and other foreign ministers. We have the Attorney General of and Minister of Justice of the Gambia, we have Chad and Sierra Leone and others. So the fact that we are here, I applaud the Ford Foundation, but the point is we need to have more engagement and make sure voices are heard to move the dial in terms of accountability. I think probably, Amal, if I may, I will leave it there.
Okay.
It can't be forgotten, just the last point, it can't be forgotten, because apart from the Security Council resolution of 1593, there is an important matter that is of the Juba Peace Agreement. That can't be airbrushed out of existence. The African Union and the leaders, including General Burhan and Hemeti, they endorsed that. They've told me directly that they support justice for the Darfuris. But these are empty words at the moment. They are rendered rather obscene when we hear the stories about the lived reality of people in Darfur for their lives. So what we need is more focus and more deliverables. The final point, if I may, because it actually came from Niemat. She raised a very important point on the internet. 7 billion people now have handphones. The internet is really being massively eroded in Sudan. It's down to 44% coverage. One issue that states could think about technically is whether or not hotspots could be created or whether devices could be given so those communities that are persecuted have an ability to upload information in real time so it can be considered. States can monitor in terms of the overhead assets and aerial devices and intercepts, but let's empower the communities. We have OTP Link, which is a secure platform, and that would also be a possible way of securely communicating information. But internet becomes an evidential issue because it can't be transmitted very easily from Darfur itself, or even from some of the camps in Chad.
Thank you. And I should just say there is now a URL, justiceforsudan.org, that can be used for people who want to submit evidence that will go directly to the ICC. We still have statements coming from Sierra Leone, Uganda, and then from the foreign ministers of Canada and Norway. So I have to ask you to be excruciatingly brief, please, in your final remarks for the last two panelists addressing the themes from the questions, but literally in a minute, if I may ask you.
Allow Madam Moderator to go back to the issue of accountability. According to the Rome Statute governing the way ICC operates, the jurisdiction of the ICC is restricted when the government is able and willing to punish or to investigate certain cases. The General Prosecutor of Sudan was in Geneva last week, and he announced that the government of Sudan has established a commission to investigate the crimes committed by the RSF. He did not mention any other group or entity, and that he has already collected 1,070 cases and has videos, declarations, testimonies from victims and witnesses. In my view, and in the view of others, I assume, this decision to create a special body to investigate just RSF crimes lacks impartiality and independence. It has no clear procedure governing the way it functions. It lacks the technical and institutional capacity in a totally decimated judicial system in Sudan.
I'm so sorry.
It also appears not to have the trust of the victims.
Can I, ask you just to reach the
conclusion? And is
otherwise
just a way to weaken and defeat the opposing party. I don't know who in the world can trust such a jurisdiction.
Thank you, and apologies. Niemat, could you please make some brief concluding statements?
Thank you, Amal. I think I would like also to thank the states that are here. I think they do care. We have to hold the states accountable as well to their obligations. Genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity are international crimes, and it has to be dealt with. And if there is no political will from some actors, those actors who have the political will must support this. And I think we also have to continue to demand it. Justice will not happen unless we demand it and we work for it. So it is the challenge that we have to pursue. And I also want to emphasize that crimes being committed from both sides. So it must be known that investigation, right now the ICC has jurisdiction over Darfur. I think what we have is enough to bring both parties to be held accountable. So let us support that to continue instead of bringing another referral that is also take another 20 years to be implemented. I think the expansion of the mandate of the prosecutor right now in Darfur, both actors who are the one who committed the crimes in Darfur, who are now committing crimes in Khartoum, and the rapid support forces is created by the current army that is fighting against it. So I wish to remind people that, and I think the Security Council and the member states have to know that pursuing accountability is more sustainable, efficient. I don't want the people of Darfur to be staying another 20 years in the camp, because providing humanitarian, peacekeeping, all of that, if we can hold the perpetrators accountable and take them out of the way, I believe the people of Sudan can live together. And that is where we need to invest our energy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Niemat. And thank you to the state representatives who've been very patient with us. I'd now like to call to the, actually a statement from the floor from His Excellency, the Permanent Representative of Sierra Leone, Michael Imran Kanu.
Thank you, moderator, and I hope all of you can see me. Firstly, allow me to thank and commend the organizers and the mission, the co-sponsoring mission, for putting together this very important event. Sudan and the other 55 equally serious and disturbing conflicts should not be a footnote in our deliberations, whether it's in New York, The Hague. I thank the panelists for their very important contributions, but allow me to thank and really commend you, Nima, for your chilling account and a reminder of what we are talking about. Permit me to just share a reflection, a perspective from Sierra Leone, and then I'll come to really how do we proceed with dealing with the Sudan situation, particularly when Sierra Leone will take up a seat at the Security Council. Sierra Leone has always emphasized the importance of consistency in approach and application of international law, particularly on accountability, more so when we're dealing with the ICC. Since it's public knowledge, allow me to share, prosecutor, that you met with His Excellency President Bio just 2 days ago. And in addition to strengthening our existing cooperation, President Bio expressed concerns regarding what seems to be a belt of violence from the Nile to the Sahel regions. He therefore underscores Sierra Leone's commitment to continue our leadership role in supporting the effectiveness of the International Criminal Court as it continues to operate within its mandate and with consistency. As we all know, we're here because the ICC really occupies an important place in the international system. The court is meant to promote respect for international humanitarian law, human rights, and contribute to freedom, security, justice, and the rule of law. And I know we're short on time, but I think I wanted to emphasize this aspect giving
very
reference
short on time.
to what Nima said. And so our engagement is really informed by our experience. You all know about the Special Court for Sierra Leone. This is an informed rule. But we really want to emphasize the important nexus between peace and justice. The court, therefore, can play that important prevention role, and I think that's the point Nima was making, advancing preservation of peace, strengthening international security, but also advancing post-conflict peace building and reconciliation. Now, we've said when we're going to the Security Council that one of our priorities is really accountability and the protection and promotion of human rights. And so we envisage that will be part of the ICC caucus and possibly playing a coordinating role. So we therefore welcome really the engagement and ongoing work of the prosecutor, particularly to investigate allegations of alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity. And as part of the African group, in really African solutions to African problem, we also have to look at it from the state perspective, but the perspective of the victims. And so there's need to ensure documentation to allow for timely accountability efforts in Sudan and in other situations. Allow me to conclude by saying that we've had you, USG, Madam Alice. I think your proactive statements were really helpful, and what you have said today is really something which we should consider. We take up our seats 1st January. We have to emphasize your preventive role, but also the accountability efforts. And we look forward to engaging on how we can make the situation in Sudan and bring it to the fore and center in the United Nations, as we do with the other conflict situations around the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So before our 2 concluding remarks by the foreign ministers, we have a final statement from Uganda. His Excellency Mr. Muhumuza. And just a desperate plea from the moderator to please keep it brief, otherwise we'll lose the foreign ministers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. It's so nice to see familiar faces here. And for me, it will not be so difficult to make it brief because most of what I would have touched has already been spoken. As you may know, Uganda has been cooperating with the ICC in all its formulations right from a long time ago. We made the first referral. Unfortunately, the situation continues to be open because the indicted individuals continue to be elusive. Just this morning, I saw something that is a damper because so that somebody from the office of the prosecutor was assisting one of the indicted individuals closely. So we were wondering, because at this point it's being mooted whether Mr. Joseph Kony should be tried in absentia, and there are others who would say, no, why don't you bring him and he faces his accusers? So in light of this dossier that just came out, I was wondering whether indeed it may not be much easier to apprehend this fugitive, because right under the office of the prosecutor, there are indications that some people were in touch with him. So there is a conundrum of things.
Just,
So
I think there may be a distinction there between having a confirmation hearing in absentia and a trial in absentia, and the latter is not contemplated at the ICC, but perhaps that's going in a rather different direction.
I'm a little ahead of you, but what I'm saying is that it should be, we should concentrate our efforts on apprehending this,
absolutely, yes,
or whatever.
And as I said in my opening, one of them has already escaped, Mr. Haroon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Your Excellency. May I now invite Her Excellency Anniken Huitfeldt, the Foreign Minister of Norway, to please come to the podium for the closing remarks.
Thank you very much, and thank you for a very important discussion. When the Sudanese people mobilized for peace, justice and freedom, one of their main concerns was accountability for the killings in June 2019 and for violations of international human rights and humanitarian law under the past regime. As you have heard here today, there have been several reports of shockingly brutal abuses and violations since the outbreak of the war in April, even acts that may amount to war crimes. So we cannot stand idly by. The civilian population urgently needs protection. We know from our experience with peace and reconciliation that accountability and transitional justice is key to durable peace. Norway always strives to be impartial, but we cannot be neutral when it comes to addressing human rights abuses and violations. Over violations of humanitarian law, impunity sows the seed of further conflict. This is why the decision of the Chief Prosecutor Khan to investigate violations of international law in Sudan is so extremely important. I also want to applaud the collection of evidence by civil society in Sudan. And we heard a very strong statement from the Darfur Women Action Group today. Thank you very much. Your voice is important, I think, to all of us, so thank you. Documentation effort will be key to ensuring accountability in the time to come. We are considering a new mechanism for collecting evidence in the Human Rights Council. A new mechanism will strengthen accountability and break the cycle of impunity. It's nevertheless up to the victims and communities to decide what they need. The most serious crimes, however, must be prosecuted. Action Now will prepare the ground for the investigations that must come, nationally and internationally, so that victims can have a voice and agency in the future. I thank you all for your very important contributions.
Thank you. Last but not least, Melanie Joly, the Foreign Minister of Canada.
Thank you, Amal. Merci beaucoup. Well, for closing remarks, I would just like to say how we were all privileged to hear your different thoughts, and particularly Niemat, your testimony on what you're hearing from your loved ones and from your different contacts and all the advocacy work you're doing. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. And thank you for raising your voice here in the context of this high-level week. Of course, as we all know, the enormity of this crisis cannot be overstated. Karim, you mentioned we need to continue to be outraged, absolutely. And I think I would add to that, we need to show humanity. And I think that was the call from many of you here, asking questions and being angry about the fact that we need to do more, which, of course, we all agree on. Alice, you mentioned that all the risk factors for genocide do exist. And in answer to that, Amal said this is chilling. Well, of course. And we must absolutely stop this. So, bearing that in mind, I think that, first of all, on the political support, we need to make sure that there are solutions by and for the region, from the African Union, from also IGAD. I've had many conversations over the past days on this very issue, including with Kenya, with Egypt, etc. And there is a multiplication of peace processes. It is an issue. We need to make sure that, there is a clear track, and we can ultimately get to a ceasefire and eventually a peace process. And we will continue as strong defenders of human rights to protect human rights defenders, protect peace builders, particularly including women, because we know, and think about the 2019 revolution, women were at the core of it. And we know that there cannot be long-lasting solutions to these issues without having women at the table. On two last points on the question of justice. Of course, we know there cannot be any lasting peace without justice. Canada is committed to pursuing accountability and fighting impunity, particularly at the ICC, and Karim knows that he can count on Canada to support the ICC, to fund it, yes, to fund it, but also to make sure that we can help you in evidence collecting. We're encouraged by the progress of the trial of Abd al-Rahman. I think we all are, because we hope this trial will help to get to long-awaited justice and healing of survivors. And we wanted to thank you, Karim, and your team, and I know Amal, you've been involved in all the work you've been doing on investigation of crimes, and particularly crimes against children and crimes against that are linked to sexual and gender-based violence. I know Canada has not imposed many sanctions on this very issue, but before you, I just wanted to say that we will. You have my personal commitment. I think it is important that we do more on sanction the human rights violators. And finally, my last point is that you can count on Canada to making sure that we support accountability in this international system, particularly when it comes to Sudan and Darfur. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We will certainly note the commitment to sanctions. I read that as an offer of more funding as well. I don't know about you. We'll take that as well. I think we'll just end where we started. We know that we're here because not enough was done the first time we saw this awful violence unfold in Darfur. Again, not enough has been done since it began again in April. I hope this can be a turning point. We heard that sanctions could be more coordinated, more robust, and similarly with evidence gathering, we need to be more united, and we need to help the International Criminal Court and others to be able to deliver their mandate. I think, Niemat, we should end with the reflection that you provided, which is what it felt to you as a survivor to go to The Hague and watch the Ali Khashayb trial. This is the first trial for crimes against humanity. Let's make sure it's not the last. Thank you all for being here.
you.